Okay, I'd like to call to order the April 6, 2022 meeting of the Sayreville Planning Board. Everybody please stand and join me with the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Beth, has this meeting been advertised in accordance with the Open Public Meeting Act?
Yes, it has.
Roll call, please.
Mr. Allegra.
Here.
Mr. Bailey.
Here.
Mr. Blamar.
Here.
Mr. McEnone.
Present.
Mr. Mueller.
Here.
Councilman Onaha. Ms. Patel. Ms. Pulowski. Mr. Spizzato.
Here.
Chairman Davis. Mr. Cornell.
Here.
Mr. Alfieri.
Here.
Mr. Fowler.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Council, we have no resolutions to memorialize, correct?
No. That's fine.
Everybody should receive the copy of the meeting minutes from February 16th, which included Bob's report attached to it. Anybody have any questions, comments, additions, deletions to the minutes? If not, I'll accept the motion to file and accept the minutes. Need a roll call vote?
Mr. Allegra.
Yes.
Mr. Bailey.
Yes.
Mr. Blamar.
Yes.
Mr. McEnone.
Yes.
Mr. Mueller. Ms. Patel. Ms. Pulowski. Mr. Pizzato.
Okay, we have no communication agenda on the subdivision hearings. Journey Mill Center LCC site plan time extension request. Is the applicant here?
Mr. Chair, members of the board, your professional staff, members of the public, good evening. My name is Peter Klauser. I'm an attorney with the firm Heilbrunn Pate. Our firm represents your applicant, Journey Mill Center LLC. This was an application that received preliminary approval and then a final site plan approval from the board for the construction of 4 smaller warehouse buildings on property located off Journey Mill Road. After the final approval that was granted, the applicant pursued their outside agency approvals. There were some complicated DEP approvals and working with the county. We think we're pretty much at the finish line with that. And of course, we dealt with the pandemic in the interim. And we have a potential buyer for the project. The approvals would have expired under the extensions that were granted by the Permanent Extension Act, we believe on December 4th, 2021. So the request this evening is for an extension of the protections from changes in the zoning ordinance from December 4th, 2021 for 1 year. It's retroactive to December 4th, 2022. And then I should also note, did some investigation and none of the zoning for the property has changed. It remains the same as the time that the board has approved it. And as this board is well aware, the approvals themselves don't expire. It's protections from changes in the zoning ordinance. So that's what we're looking for, is to just carry those protections through for 1 additional year.
He's correct. So with regards to a preliminary major site plan, there is a 2-year period, and then there are three 1-year extensions that an applicant can apply for. They're applying for one of those 3-year extensions, one of those extensions now, and it can be applied retroactively. So they're requesting only to December 4th, 2022. Correct?
That's correct.
At the end of this year.
Okay, anything?
No, Mr. Chairman, I can attest to all the outside agency approvals. I know that they spent a lot of time dealing with the DEP, and they're also were considered a non-sewered area, so they had to get the county plan amended to allow them to go back into a sewered area. So they've been going back and forth, working on outside agency permits, and they are very close at this point.
Planner, anything? Any questions, comments from the board? Anybody? I need a motion. Motion to accept the time extension?
Yes.
Okay, have a motion to accept. I need a second. Need a roll call vote?
Mr. Allegra.
Yes.
Mr. Bailey.
Yes.
Mr. Blamar.
Yes.
Mr. McEnone.
Yes.
Mr. Mueller.
Yes.
Ms. Patel. Ms. Pulowski. Mr. Spizzato.
Yes.
Your time extension has been
Granted.
approved.
Thank you very much. Have a good evening. Thank you, Doctor.
Next on the agenda, we have MK Associates Incorporated, Posh Car Wash, minor site plan, block 439.01, lot 4, 932 Route 9 South, Sayreville. Counselor?
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, board members. My name is Michael Page, and I represent the applicant MK Associates LLC. I believe the requisite jurisdictional documents have already been presented.
Mr. Chairman, I've reviewed the notice package and everything appears to be in order.
Very good. You may proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ladies and gentlemen of the board, my client presents this application for your consideration for minor site plan approval to permit the installation and placement of 6 vacuums together with parking stall alterations on the premises located at 932 Route 9 South in Sayreville, otherwise known as the Posh Car Wash. In presenting this application for the board's consideration this evening, my client will present 3 witnesses who will testify as to the particular details of the proposed ancillary use and in further support of the within application. They are as follows: Mark Markowitz, on behalf of the applicant, Frank Farrell, professional engineer, and Benjamin Miller, professional acoustic engineer. First, I would like to call Mr. Mark Markowitz. Right, man.
Mr. Markowitz, can you raise your hand? Right? Do you swear or affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Can you please state and spell your name for the record?
First name Mark, M-A-R-C. Last name is Markowitz, M-A-R-K-O-W-I-T-Z.
What is your affiliation with the
I'm
applicant?
one of the managing partners for the MK Associates.
Thank you.
Mr. Markowitz, you're one of the managing partners for MK Associates, correct?
That's correct.
And you run the operations of the business?
Yes.
For how long have you operated the business?
It's been a family-run business for 33 years. We opened in 1989
Okay.
in that location.
And what are the current hours of operation for the car wash and the express lube business?
Currently, we're open from Monday through Friday from 8 a.m. to 7 p.m. and then Saturdays and Sundays, 8 a.m. to 5 p.m.
Okay. And what are the proposed hours for the operation of the vacuums with regard to this
They
application?
would coincide with the car wash hours.
Okay. And how many employees do you expect to have on a maximum shift at any one time now for the car wash and the express lube?
Well, basically, we've changed our whole business plan since COVID hit. So in other words, we used to be a full service car wash where you got out of the car and you walk through, the store area and our guys vacuum it for you. Since then, when COVID hit, they closed us down because we weren't allowed to go into cars. So we started doing exterior only. And we've decided that from that point on to continue to do just exterior. So we've closed our store area off and we don't offer any vacuuming anymore to customers, and customers, continually want to have their car vacuumed. So we are trying to offer them the self-serve vacuums along, the side of the building. That's the reason why we're adding it, because the way labor is today, we're trying to cut our labor. So basically, we're just going to have one guy that collects money and one guy that guides the person onto the track. And then there'll be 3 guys in the oil change facility at a max time. So there'll be a total of 5 on a max day. We'll no longer be drying the car. We're doing extensive renovation of equipment. There's new advances in equipment, so you don't have to dry cars today anymore. And that's where this whole industry is going to, less labor. And that's, the reason why we're doing this.
So that you explained to the board about 5 employees, then plus yourself for it being in the office there, correct?
Right. We have multiple locations, so I'm kind of in and out of locations. But when I'm there, there's an office area, so I stay in the office or, with my guys.
Okay, so then basically at any given time, you're only expecting to utilize approximately 6 spaces at the most for
That's
yourself and your
at a
employees.
max. Yeah.
Okay, so the parking spots near the vacuums would be available for customers to use.
If they had to,
Well,
yeah.
there's 15 proposed spots on the plans. So
Currently.
if you were going to take up 6 with your employees and yourself, there would be 9 still available.
Correct.
And I believe there are 8 located along the vacuum area.
That's correct.
Now, what about off-site parking? Do you or any of your employees require, or would you be required to park anywhere off of the site?
No, there wouldn't be a need for that.
And how about deliveries? How are they accommodated on the site?
Generally, they're off hours, 8 o'clock in the morning, or they pull in, pull out. There's a fire lane on the side.
So
That's It's worked for 33 years.
Okay, so your delivery schedule is not changing or anything?
Nothing is
is
really changing. We're
Yeah.
just adding the self-serve vacuum.
Okay, and you're not proposing to add any additional signage or make any other improvements to the property other than reconfiguring the parking area a little, or the
Right, in other
parking
words,
area?
instead of the stalls being straight, what they are right now, they may be a little bit angled.
Okay, and allowing for the vacuums to be placed in between, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
It's basically an ancillary use, so people are there anyway, getting their car washed. They want to have the opportunity to vacuum their car as well, which right now they don't.
Okay, I have no further questions for Mr. Markowitz at this time.
I have a question. Are these vacuums going to be able to be activated after business hours?
No, they're going to be shut off. In other words, when the car wash is closed, they'll be completely shut off.
I've seen in your business where you have maybe 10 or 12 cars in line to get washed, and now you go into vacuum. How do I get into that line?
How do you get into the vacuum line?
Into the car wash line from the
In other
vacuum?
words, if you would pull in off Route 9, get online, if you decide you wanted to get your car vacuumed, you just pull to the left, or you can continue around to the facility. Either way, and then you would just back out and get right inside the line. We have a sign there. In other words, right now, currently where the oil change customers get
I
in,
allowed them to get into the line, right?
right. Basically, it would be the same thing. Please let our attendant or our vacuum customers enter line. I mean, it's worked since we've had the oil change for 15 years. Hasn't been a problem.
Questions from the board for this applicant, for this witness? Okay. Planner?
Yes.
Good.
Along the same lines with the being a queue of cars and using the vacuums and coming out of the car wash. So if you decide you're getting your car wash first, you get your car wash, and then you want to go around the vacuum and the cars are all queued, you're saying
Right.
that you
It's also a little bit different now, just so you understand, when you're a full service operation, you're getting out of the car. So maybe, some women might have kids in the car. So, and also the cars are a lot dirtier and you're taking a lot more time vacuuming it when you're full service. So the line has tendency to, queue up. When you're exterior only, it's very rare that you get those 10, 12 car lines because you're pushing the cars through. It's a different operation than it was in the past.
but you did have the line and the car you went to the car wash and went to go up with the vacuum and the cars are all.
Yeah, I mean, you can get back online if you've already washed, you mean?
You already washed and now you want to go vacuum.
Right, you can either exit out onto Route 9 or swing back around. And if there's a line of cars, you're gonna have to wait to get into the vacuum stall.
It just seems like, if you have to wait, nobody let you in, you can't, all you want to do is vacuum your car, and you're waiting for 5 or 6 other cars to move up far enough so that you can get to the back.
It's very rarely, I mean, do we have those days where it's after a snow or after an inclement weather where and especially now with the exterior only operation, we can do 70, 80 cars an hour. So you rarely get those lines that you had before.
You may need a staff person to allow people to get up the vacuums and just want to vacuum. People think you might be cutting in line, not know where you're coming from. Same thing, so the vacuum first, and want to go to the car wash, and backing out. You get into the
Right.
queue, and go to the car wash, so you may need somebody out there to direct.
It's possible, but like I said, what we do now with the.
During our busy days where you.
Yeah, listen, on a Saturday after a snow, hopefully we get those days. We haven't lately, but hopefully we'll get those days.
Next witness?
Thank you, Mr. Markowitz. Next, I'd like to call Frank Farrell, professional engineer.
I see you have an easel. Would you like me to use yours, or I came prepared with my own?
Oh, you
Is that
can
one?
use mine, whatever.
Mr. Farrell, would you please state your,
Swear in first.
Yeah, sorry.
Do you swear or affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Can you please state your name for the record and spell it?
Frank Farrell, last name's Farrell.
What are your qualifications?
I'm a licensed professional engineer in the state of New Jersey. I received my license in 2016. I've appeared before a number of boards in the state as recently as March 28th in New Brunswick.
You accept his credentials. Everybody in favor?
Go on.
Thank you. Please proceed.
Thank you.
Mr. Farrell, you prepared the plans for this application, correct?
That's correct.
All right, and you are also in receipt of the Borough Engineers report dated February 2nd, 2022,
I am, as well as the planners.
as well as the Board Planners Report dated January 27th. If you could please explain to the board the details of the plan. And in doing so, I would ask that you please address any of the outstanding issues mentioned in the borough's professionals reports.
Absolutely. So what I have is just this site plan that was submitted as a part of the application. It's not a rendering. It hasn't been altered in any way, for the record. As we're probably all familiar, the site is located on Route 9, and it's a through lot that actually extends out onto Burlew Place to the rear. The site is occupied by an existing masonry structure. None of that will change. A portion of the building is 2 stories, but for the most part, it's 1. There is an entrance onto the site from US 9 in the southbound direction. And there is also an egress from the site onto Route 9, and that's roughly in that same location. And there's also an egress only out onto Burlew Street, Burlew Place, my apology. The various land uses in the area include other commercial and residential uses. And the site is going to be altered in one way. I'm going to flip the site plan over. You'll see our existing site has 16 parking spaces and the proposed has 15. Absolutely. Sure.
I'd be a terrible magician. Any changes. The 16th Spark parking space was in this area here to the rear of the site, closest to Burlew Place. And it was oversized. Typically parking spaces are 9x18s. That one was quite a bit wider than your typical 9-foot wide space. The spaces for the vacuums are 11 feet wide, which is in accordance with industry standards for that type of use, for a self-serve vacuum space. So we've removed one space and attributed that 9+ feet to the remainder of the spaces in the row. So now we've got 15. I believe 6 of which are 11 feet wide rather than 9. The entire rest of the site, the parking in the front, the building, the facade, the signage, everything else will remain the same. The nearest vacuum stall to any neighboring property is the stall that's roughly located at the vacuum that is roughly located at stall 15. And it's approximately 55 feet from the property line, which is block 349, lot 9. That'll become relevant when our acoustical engineer testifies in a minute. And any existing fencing or screening that is located on this property would also remain as well. There's no changes to lighting. There's no changes to any of the rest of it. It's simply a restriping of the parking stalls and then the installation of vacuums. If you'd like, I can go through the zone compliance schedule, but that again has not changed since the site plan and that was approved in 2007. There was one comment in I believe it was in the planner's report that described evaluating the site for drainage improvements like a rain garden. In this location, it's simply impracticable due to the nature of the site, the way that it gets used, the traffic circulation, on top of which there's no real proposed construction. We're not breaking ground. We're not cutting into the pavement in any way that would sort of give us an opportunity to do a feature like that, and I don't believe it necessary either. We're not increasing impervious coverage. I believe that covered.
I know you can probably, you covered some of the things, but if you can just go through the CME report and Jay, just make sure that everything's
Absolutely.
covered.
I can grab a copy of it out of my file, or you have one to share. I got one.
There's a number of waivers that are being requested. They're pre-existing waivers, but technically you're reviewing them again because it's a new application. If you want to just run through the waivers, you will.
Absolutely. Hold this, I got this one. There's no loading area proposed in the site. There isn't one there now. There won't be one when we're done. And as you heard Mr. Markowitz testify, deliveries have been handled at this location for many years without the need for a loading space. And as a result, the applicant's requesting a waiver from that requirement. In addition, sidewalks are required throughout the parking area. We're requesting a waiver again from that requirement as well. There isn't really a new or suitable place because, again, the site's not changing, the parking's not changing. And so the applicant is requesting a waiver from having to include additional sidewalk within an already paved area. The site plan does not provide Mr. Cornell's item B, landscaping and lighting. The site plan does not provide for a 50-foot landscaped buffer from residential adjacent properties as required by borough ordinance. The applicant's requesting a waiver from that, which is accurate. It's my understanding as part of a prior application, the screening was installed and has been in place for many years. The site's not getting any bigger. We certainly don't have the room to provide an additional buffer area now. As a result, we're requesting a waiver. No waiver is required or variance is required for parking. We're actually, I believe, exceed the ordinance requirement by one space, even though we're removing one space from the plan now. Off-street parking areas, this is C2 in Mr. Cornell's report. The off-street parking areas are not to be located within the required front yard setback. The proposed parking layout does not satisfy this requirement, and we're requesting a waiver for that as well, which is accurate. The front out onto Route 9, those spaces are there and have been. There's four, I believe there's 4 parking spaces, one of which is actually an ADA compliant handicap stall, which will remain. And we're requesting a waiver from the front yard requirement for parking.
Mr. Chairman, just for the board's information, back in 2007, when the oil loop facility was added onto the car wash, there was a lot of discussion about that 50-foot landscape buffer. I know some of the residents came and they were concerned about it. This applicant actually entered into an agreement with the adjacent owner and I believe funded putting landscaping and fencing on their property to try to provide some type of buffer because they didn't have the room to do it. So there was an attempt to work with the neighbors at that point in time to try to address that buffer waiver.
That's my understanding as well. And it's a very healthy looking buffer now. Those, the trees that were planted at or after the time of that approval are sizable.
Planners report, Bob, do you have any concerns?
The Warren had mentioned earlier about parking for employees, like 5 employees, maybe for himself or as part of
Correct.
6 spaces used, and the rest are just available for the vacuum. But what about people who are coming to have a car and somebody else will have it done? That's every parking spaces also. How many spaces generally utilized for that service?
I would have to defer to Mr. Markowitz about the use of the.
Drive-through only oil change facility can change, so you don't get out of the car anymore. There's no point for parking, and it's an exterior only car wash, so you sit inside and you just get out, you know, off the property. So no parking for customer use
At all? Thank you.
On top of which we comply with the ordinance requirement, which I would imagine took into account the need for employees and other users that would enter and use the oil change facility.
Any board members have any questions for the engineer? Okay. Next witness, please.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Farrow.
Next, I'd like to call Mr. Benjamin Muller, a professional engineer, a professional acoustic engineer.
Truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Can you please state your name, spell your last name for the record?
Benjamin Muller, Mueller.
And what are your qualifications?
I'm a licensed professional engineer in the state of New Jersey. My undergraduate work degree is with mechanical engineering from Villanova University. Tough loss last weekend. Then I also have a master's in mechanical engineering with a concentration in noise and vibration control from Stevens Institute. I've been practicing in the field of noise control for the past 20 years now. And I've been accepted as a professional expert in numerous municipalities across New Jersey.
Thank you.
Board accepts his credentials. You may continue.
Thank you. Mr. Miller, you've been retained by the applicant for your expertise in acoustical or sound engineering with regard to this application. Correct? And you are in receipt of the Borough Engineers Report and the Board's Planners Report in this regard?
Yes.
And I'm going to bring your attention to I think your a report that you rendered dated February 18th, 2022. If you could identify that for the board, and I think the board all has copies of that report.
So we were retained to evaluate the acoustical aspect of the installation of the 6 vacuum cleaners, and we carried out projections of those units, evaluated the aspects of the various codes that are in play, and rendered conclusions and put all of those findings in our February 18th report.
And if you would, I'd ask that you kindly advise the board as to your analysis of the sound that's anticipated to be emanated from the proposed vacuums to be installed by the applicant.
Certainly. So this is just be a crash course of the report, but I just want to give the highlights. So with any analysis, we always start out with what's our criteria, our legal obligations in order to make sure we conform with applicable noise codes. We have our state regulation under NJAC 7:29, which is very well written, and it promulgates throughout the entire state of New Jersey. We also have our Sayreville ordinance, which is located under Police Regulations Section 5-3. And that is a version of the state model ordinance, which is great. That means that the state is trying to propagate common language and made these segments available for municipalities to adopt. And so therefore, we're talking about the same thing, both under the state and local ordinance. So in summary, what it does is it regulates sound produced by commercial or industrial uses to not exceed 65 dBA, and that's being the A-weighted level. So that's our overall level during the daytime hours, 7 a.m. to 10 p.m. Note that our business operating hours align and are within that daytime hour window. During the nighttime hours, which would then be 10 p.m. to 7 a.m., that limit reduces down to 50 dBA, which is a substantial drop for only residential receptors. So again, that's not the focus of our analysis discussion, since we're only discussing the operating daytime hours. There are also other nuances to the code. I don't think that they add anything to our discussion. So if we focus on the 60 dBA, and also the state and local ordinances also have octave band limits. So octave bands are your individual tones that might occur, much like the octaves on a piano. And so the goal there is to make sure that we don't have a higher than an overall level, but we also don't create any sort of tonal component in the individual octave band frequencies. The background for establishing 65, it's not just a mysterious number pulled out of thin air, but it is designed to be at the level of a normal conversation at 3 feet. And so 65 dB is the level of conversing with another person at 3 feet. And therefore, having any sort of background or additional noise that would be higher than that might cause you to raise your voice and strain it. So the whole purpose of the daytime noise ordinance is to make sure that we maintain good speech communication. Just to take one step away from that's exactly what the code says. The New Jersey DEP has provided a guideline letter in order to help discuss interpretive questions on the code, as well as answer questions regarding enforcement. And so one of the interesting things that the guideline immediately says is that the noise code was never designed to be used for prospective compliance, which guilty is what we're doing now. As an engineer, it's one of the few tools that we have to try to forecast or assess the situation. The noise code was designed to be a response tool for dealing with complaints. And so the way the noise code is worded is that in order for you to violate the noise code, we need to have a formal documented complaint from a party, as well as then exceeding the limit. And so what we're going to talk about tonight is an acoustical evaluation and from an engineering aspect of those values. But then we're also going to talk about what the likelihood of generating a complaint is. So that being said, we have manufacturer's data from the vacuum unit from the manufacturer, and they provide it's actually a compact integral. It's a one-piece unit, and it has a steel insulated dome acoustical package. So with these things being used all over the states, they've designed it to be as quiet as they can. There's a system that they put together. So for the sound data from the units, not only is sound going to emanate from the body of the unit, which is where the motor and the blower are located, but we also have a nozzle and the hose for that. So the data that's provided is really just here it is in the middle of a parking lot, and they've taken some data from it at certain distances. Sound falls off from distance, just like any other physics, like light or other entities. And then we also take a look at, well, what are our intervening structures? So here we have a nice vegetative buffer, which we're not taking credit for because of the fact that even though it's lush and green, it's not exactly the same as a wall. What we did take credit for, though, is the 8-foot tall PVC vinyl fence that's located along the property line. And what we did is we adjusted just a conservative 5 dB reduction for that unit. So with one unit operating along our proposed location, going over to the property line, which is 55 feet away, taking a little conservative attenuation for the fence, one unit would produce around 54 on the residential side of that barrier. So you can see that that's well below the 65 dB limit. Now, what happens is as additional units turn on, there is a cumulative effect to it. Now, from a scientific, just using an engineering point of view, we know how those units might add together, and units add in a logarithmic fashion, not in a linear fashion. So with one unit producing 54, 2 units don't produce 108, but rather they only add 3 dB together. So it will be 54 for the first one. If 2 of them are on, it would be 57. And then when the third one turns on, it doesn't quite increase at another 3 dB, but instead it would go to 59. So this is kind of how things are adding together. When we look at not only the overall code limit, but also all of our octave band criteria, we start to just hit the ceiling of those noise code limits when we get to 4 units operating simultaneously. Now, 4 units operating simultaneously are only 60 dBA at the other side on the residential property. Now, it's still 5 dB of a buffer from the top of the overall limit. But because the vacuum cleaners are a little bit more high frequency content, we are just tapping that upper threshold of one of the octave band limits. Now, we are still requesting the approval for 6 units. And I think that we have several factors to take into consideration to allow that. If we did have all 6 units operating, that full maximum level produced on the property line is only 2 dB higher than what we said with the 4 units. So we would still have only a 62 dBA overall level. And then in the 1 octave band, we would have a 2 dB exceedance of that. I use exceedance just in terms of having it be above or below and not in a negative manner. So with that being the case, what's the likelihood of 6 units running at the same time? Mr. Markowitz already talked about how his business model is. The units are on a 4-minute time operated feature. And so just looking at it from a logical perspective, the chances of all 6 units operating at the same time for a 4-minute duration or any sort of considerable duration is going to be minimal. I don't think that that's going to be the type of setup that's needed here. It's basically one person uses a slot, one opens, right? Somebody is throwing out the garbage from inside their car. That's coming from my personal experience at similar facilities. So I don't think that we're going to even have much, if any, of a collection of 6 units operating at the same time. The other thing to discuss with that is that we are looking at just taking the raw sound data from the manufacturer, which is kind of a clean test in the middle of their setup. But now we're adding in the car that's parked in front of the vacuum cleaner. We have not taken consideration the fact that how much is emanating from the unit versus the nozzle. And we know that the nozzle is going to go inside the car and have different angles that it is going to be exhibiting. So we think that our analysis is very conservative. The last thing to point out, though, again, with the chance that 6 units might be operating at the same time, is the likelihood of complaints. And the likelihood of complaints is really based on a number of things. One would be the presence of Route 9. We know that that's a well-traveled roadway. So our emissions blending in with the existing emissions of Route 9 are a factor to consider. Noise sensitivity of the receptor would also be a factor. And, you know, just their location. We've been doing our analysis right at the property line. There is a backyard there. There are other areas to be. Those will be further distances. So I think what we've shown is that looking at it from an engineering lens, that we show that there is this small chance of having an exceedance there. But I think all the other elements that are in play here show that the likelihood of this being a complaint, if 6 were running, is very diminished, that we're not going to have that chance. But we also fully acknowledge that we have a noise code in place, both on the local and the state level. And should there ever be a noise complaint, the proper procedure would be followed and it would be evaluated and compared to the limits that we've discussed tonight. And if there is an exceedance and the associated complaint, then the applicant is going to continuously be required to provide some sort of mitigation. And as part of my testimony, the easy way would be to limit the number of units that are operating at the same time, as opposed to doing some sort of other mitigation, a wall or things like that. So in summary, I mean, based on my professional opinion, 6 units would be acceptable and would not result in any complaints. And therefore we would fully comply with the local and state noise codes.
I have a question.
Yes.
Based on everything you said, now I would say that some of the cumulative sound pressure that you talked about is subjective, because sound, there's a lot of different variables, the ambient air temperature, the air pressure that given day, and how sound propagates through that. On your report, it says you note that the plans call out for 6 vacuum units, but based on the analysis, you only recommend 4 be installed. Can you explain that discrepancy?
Well, so the 4 is that's a slam dunk, if you will. That's not a technical term, but in other words, we've shown with analysis that 4 operating fully comply or below the limits. And so what would then, if there was a complaint, that would prove the responsibility of the applicant to comply with the limits. When we start to get to a 5th and a 6th, I think when you start to look at the outside of an engineering aspect, and we start to look at how is it going to be used, what are the other factors that weren't considered in our analysis, such as the ambient, those then continue to support that a 5th and 6th unit can be installed and not result in any negative impact on the surrounding area and not bolster any noise complaints.
I think based on the sound pressure, then we have to assume all 6 vacuum cleaners will be on at the same time. That's why you would install 6. I guess you want all 6 running at the same time.
I understand from an engineering point of view, yes, that would be the analysis.
What is your analysis based on all 6 running at the same time?
So with all 6 running, we would be 62 on the residential side of the fence, and we would have a 2 dB excess in the 4,000 hertz band. So in terms of pass or fail, you know, from if there was a complaint, we would show that there would be an exceedance at 4,000 hertz, and we would be obligated to mitigate that. From the prospect of having a complaint and whether or not this 2 dB exceedance is within the tolerance of enforcement or any other number of ways that it could be discussed, measured in the presence of Route 9 traffic, et cetera, I do not feel that this 2 dB would restrict the applicant from installing the 6 and operating them.
Mr. Chairman, the fact that the highway is there, you are going to have some background noise with regard to the highway, but I think there's a concern with the applicant's experts saying the potential of an exceedance is there based on 6 operating at the same time. When I saw the report, I thought the application might be amended to only propose 4, which is what it seems like that's what you had recommended. I think there's some concern of potential impacts on the adjacent property owner if you put the 6 in and have them potentially operating at the same time.
So to give I guess a helpful explanation of the difference between when the units are turning on and off. We've been talking about increments of 1, 2, and 3 dB. Basically, when you have one unit on, it's a certain level. When the second one comes on, that's the biggest change. It's going to go up by 3 dB. Then when the third one goes on, the fourth one goes on, it's an incremental. It's a 2 dB, it's 1, it's a half dB, et cetera. 3 dB is really going to be the only level that you might just hear a change. So from a receptor's point of view, there should be no indication whether 3 units are running, 5 units are running, or 6 units are running. It's going to be a very minimal transition. So again, that is why I would support that the 6 units are not going to have a negative impact or result in complaints or be out of line for this specific
But you're
location.
not taking consideration, each one of those vacuum cleaners are not equidistant from the property.
That is correct
So
too.
the decibel, your evaluation of the cumulative decibel increase is not going to be that accurate.
See,
Because you get this time, the 6th one goes on, it's the closest one to the property.
correct. So in lies that, that we start to have, start to pull the thread and start to get into more and more of analysis. Not only do we have different unit locations and different distances, albeit only by a small amount, but we're trying to look at a single location that would experience all of their levels simultaneously. That's the worst place. That's the worst location. And then, that we're only analyzing one location. There's going to be other locations that will have different distances and result in different analyses. So we're trying to simplify it to provide it all in the context of one report. But to your point, yes, the units are slightly different distances. And depending on where the vantage point of the receptor is, would result in slightly different. This is presenting the worst case.
The possibility exists that all 6 running, that you would exceed the decimal requirement by the ordinance.
That's what I provided here. Yes, the testimony that we would have a 2 dB exceedance in 4K if 6 units were running at exactly the same time.
I think it might be more than that.
Why so?
Well, it depends on when you take your rating.
Everything testified to and in the report has been the worst case. Where is the closest? The 55 dB, the 55 feet is the closest to the one unit. Then the next unit is 55.5 feet away. Then the next unit is 60 feet away. And if you go all the way to the most eastern unit, it ends up being about 60 feet away. So what we're doing is we're saying all 6 units at 55 feet, again, trying to simplify things in a presentation as well as analysis. That's what we're looking at.
But the reason I asked that is because you report, you recommend 4. That's why, that's the genesis of my questions. And I wanted to just know what changed from your briefing, your testimony tonight versus to what you submitted as part of the record. So you're going to amend your report for the record, or are you going to still say you can recommend 4 in the report?
I don't feel that my testimony has dramatically changed from it. I'm providing additional information to help the board weigh in on that. The applicant wants 6 units. We've shown that from an engineering point of view, putting in 4 and having them run at the same time fully complies with the ordinance limits. But I'm also introducing the discussion tonight about the complaint aspects and as well as Route 9 and other features, and also saying that we're not asking to exceed the limit. What we're asking to is to be able to operate the proposed installation, and I'm testifying that that's not going to result in any negative impact.
Anybody else have any questions for engineer? Go ahead.
The 2 dB that were exceeded, can you kind of explain to me what that, like how, what kind of impact is it, like how loud is it? And kind of like something I would understand.
Right. Well, so we talked about that a bit ago where, that 2 dB is not able to be discerned. I wouldn't provide you with a level of 60 and then 62, and majority of people will not be able to say which one was which. We're most used to, like in school, when we would do the A/B test, right? Listening to 2 sounds at a 3 dB difference. That's when we're able to kind of say that A is louder than B. When we get to a 6 dB difference, then generally everyone's able to clearly state that one is louder or quieter than the other. So, so this levels we're talking about here are all, below 65 dBA, and 65 is a normal conversation at 3 feet between you and another person with normal vocal strength.
And then my other question is, you said you would limit the vacuums if there were any complaints.
Well, the site is obligated to, conform with the noise code. And so the noise code says, if there is a complaint and an investigation is done and you're over the limit, then you're required to mitigate it, or there's a penalty. Or
How would you mitigate? It? How would you
Well,
limit? Turn one off?
my recommendation would be that we would, you could lock one, or you would red tape it or whatever. Having the 6 units does provide a benefit of that. If unit number 4 is down for repairs, that the facility still has one in reserve. And I think that, Mr. Markowitz can come and testify to the business model, but, having that flexibility to, if there's a chance that someone's parked there and isn't vacuuming their car, that allows for a customer to successfully vacuum their vehicle. So what I'm trying to provide here is that even though we have a code, it does have merit to it and there is weight to it, but we're not using it in the exact correct term. So even though an analysis shows that we might have a 2 dB exceedance, I do not believe we have the other aspect of it, which is that is going to be enough to trigger complaints and to warrant an investigation and to have all that out. We're looking at here as the board, because that's our due diligence. And obviously me looking at it from the applicant side of view, we're trying to see, well, how does this all fit into things? So I have an analytical analysis, but then I also have a professional opinion based on what we see. And what we're really focusing on here is that at 1 octave band, there is a 2 dB exceedance. So we're not asking for, forgiveness or not that the laws don't apply to us. We're saying that this is what the analysis shows, but that in place and in practice, we're not violating any ordinance. We're not asking for you to approve something that doesn't comply with the code limits.
Well, let me just clarify something for the record. When you testified earlier, did you say that you did or did not include the background noise in Route 9?
We did not.
No.
Did not. So the way the noise code is written is it's solely on our contribution. So bringing the ambient into it is something that can be done. You would then be doing an acoustical impact, which is kind of what we're opining on here. But that element would then, like, we could go out there now and measure, and it might be 65 already. And so one would then never hear the difference of whether someone was going higher than the applicable limits. Yes.
Coin operated vacuum units.
Either coin or,
Coin or credit card.
Okay, and in terms of your study, you based it off the manufacturer specs,
yes,
and you took the highest end number.
correct, yes.
There was no way to replicate what it would be like to get portable units on there and do an actual sound test to see what it would be.
No, there's a lot of variables. Part of my job and difficulty is always to minimize those variables. We want to, take them into consideration because they're meaningful, but to try to control them to the best of my ability. And so, by putting units on top of each other, taking the worst case, doing our projections, a conservative reduction from the fence, et cetera, I think we have a really good story to tell here, and there shouldn't be any concerns on the board side as to whether this is going to result in any sort of issues. So that's my struggle with this, to try to relay.
Is there a standard number of these coin operated vacuum units that are on a typical car wash?
I don't know the answer to that. I'm assuming that Mr. Markowitz has based it on his volume or availability. You're always trying to maximize that.
Currently, the 2 other car washes.
Mr. Markowitz, just a second. If you're going to, can you come up to the microphone so we can get it on the record? Thank you.
Currently, is it on? Yeah. Currently, there are 2 other car washes in Sayreville on Bordentown Avenue and by the Raritan on Raritan Road. And they both have at least 7 vacuums there.
Okay, that's helpful.
So you couldn't, I have a question for you. So you couldn't take into consideration, there's large evergreens that are planted behind a fence. So that isn't included in your.
No, we specifically chose not to.
Okay.
Foliage in nature, I realize that these are evergreens, but most deciduous, change across the seasons in our region here. And it's just easier to just say that we're not going to take any credit for it.
Any other questions from engineers from the board?
I have one more.
Go ahead.
You have 15 parking spots, not 6 for the vacuum, 6 for employees, so that leaves 3 spots. Who would use these 3 spots? What are the, who else would be using parking there besides employees in the back?
There's really nobody,
Nobody else, right?
no.
Any other questions?
That question, you discussed your weekday hours, Saturdays and Sundays, what are your hours?
8 AM to 5 PM.
Has there been any conversation about limiting the number of simultaneous pumps on a weekend? To reduce noise on a weekend?
Not that I'm aware of.
Okay. Would there be any consideration given if knowing that there are variables that indicate that we can exceed decibels, right, within a specific octave?
Yes.
right? Would there be a conversation about potentially limiting simultaneous usage on a weekend?
Gotta ask him as far as if they weren't.
It's more of an application. So in other words, if on the weekends, would you be okay with the stipulation as a condition of approval of only operating 4 on the weekends versus 6 during the weekend?
I probably would want to keep it the same, you know. Weekday, I'm not gonna, you know, go out there every time, tell a customer to leave if they're using that one or not. Doesn't, you know, doesn't work.
So anything less than a 3 dB level is not discernible.
Correct.
Okay.
Sure, good.
Your analysis, you said you stacked back at the site at a single point,
Yes,
closest point to the.
55 feet, correct, yes.
I guess this is the closest point to the property.
Yes,
All right, so if you say that, once you, if you have all 6 in a single spot and you're at 62 dBA, you put number 1 at the closest spot, you put 2, it's further away, 3 is further away, 5, 6, 6 is even further away. Would you still be producing the same decibel?
no, it would be lower.
Get lower and lower as further and further away.
Yeah,
So your analysis is the worst case scenario.
Correct.
In one spot.
Yes,
That's not to be the reality. Yeah.
correct. You're also going to have unit 5 on and then 4 and then 3 and 2 at the same time. And then, right, it's going to be a much more fluid
So
scenario.
1 at 50 feet is, you said, 50,
Just 1 is 54,
54.
55 feet. Mhm.
So what's the distance at the furthest away?
I don't have that offhand, but it would be probably closer to 60 something.
Measure it, I can tell you. Four times, it's 60 feet.
So it'd be an additional 5 feet.
Further away.
Correct.
So you'd be less decibels.
Yeah, it would be a more complicated analysis, but you're right, you would then have it be unit 1 distance plus unit 2 distance plus unit 3 distance, et cetera. So it would be more conservative than the analysis I presented here.
I'm asking because the one, we're asking whether or not we want to limit quantity.
Right,
It's the worst case scenario, it's never going to be reality.
correct,
So
correct. And
what would the be reality? Why wouldn't we have a worst case scenario and what the good condition would be analysis?
say that,
What
state
would
that
the
again.
analysis read if you put all 6 in their active positions?
In the center of it, it would be some,
You put all 6 up and then you put the closest distance to the property. What would the reading be?
I could do that for you, but I don't have that information offhand.
You might not be exceeding at that point.
Correct. Correct. There are factors involved that if we were to go at post and do a survey, I believe we would show compliance. It's a lot of other variables that we're trying to avoid talking about and keep things narrow. But you're right, we're now talking about the 2 dB exceedance that we have presented here.
Only for
Correct. Correct. And we haven't talked about it tonight at all, but my analysis did include, and I don't consider it to be a variable that I would want to wash, but that all the units are along the building and that the building does have a factor involved. So all the units have already been goosed up because of the building. And so we've taken that into consideration, that's directing the noise,
the building, the absorbing sound or
reflecting. So that's in there. And again, conservative, so my numbers are higher. If it was required, yeah, there are different things that can be explored.
Based on, Counselor, based on what I'm hearing from the board and the concerns, would the applicant be willing to put a stipulation in the resolution if the board was to act favorably on this application, that once all 6 units are in there, that an acoustic test is done? And if it exceeds the requirement for decibel limitation by the ordinance, that we mitigate that by shutting one down or whatever we need to do?
I can certainly talk to the applicant, but I think there's two parts to that as explained by the acoustic engineer. Even if any of the decibels, and he could explain it a little bit better, but if it did exceed any certain level right at the property line right there, that the second part of it, just because a sound is created doesn't mean that it will generate a complaint. So if it were, let's say, if the limit's 65 and it was 64, and then you took a measurement and it was 66, if it was not discernible to the person or the neighbor or whoever's that property line that might be, then it's not going to generate a complaint. So it's not going to violate the noise ordinance. The ordinance is designed to set a level based on evidence, scientific evidence, the level, but it has to generate a complaint. I think the other engineer gave a good example. If a tree falls in a forest, does it make a sound? Or does it make a sound that's louder than would be allowed or be offensive to somebody or annoying to somebody? Not if they don't hear it. And so this, by the same token, if there is any type of exceedance with 6 vacuums all working at once, the worst case scenario, which we're not going to have because they are separated, and you can have other factors as he testified, cars, the nozzles in the cars between the cars online for the car wash also blocking that noise. But even if it did exceed that, if it's not any different between to the neighbor, it doesn't cause her to, or anybody to trigger a complaint, then it's not a violation. There's no violation of the noise ordinance if there's no complaint.
Say something, 1 second. I just want to address the board 1 minute because I'm on good terms with the neighbors.
Yes.
We've been very, for 33 years.
No
I know
complaints.
no complaints at all. I took care of them back when we originally did the oil change facility. Their main concern coming here tonight is the operation, that it's closed down when the car wash is closed, which is understandable. They don't want people vacuuming their car 24 hours a day.
No, it was
And-
terrible, 11 and 12
Hey,
o'clock.
wait,
If
we'll
we
give you an
could,
opportunity to
we
come up
could.
and speak. We open it for the public, so.
That's going to be the main concern or opposition from the neighbor.
And I know you have done that.
We'll let them
speak
provide
if-
that.
I just wanted to
Okay.
point that out, that we are on good terms.
All right, well,
And I understand their
We'll
problem.
let them speak and we'll have that on the record, so to support what you're saying, so. Counselor, your comments to what the counselor said about,
Well, it's a noise ordinance, right? So the ordinance, it requires compliance. The testimony provided tonight is that you are in compliance with that sound ordinance or you're not in compliance? Because we're not talking about enforceability. You're before the board seeking the approval. And part of the application is to submit support that you're gonna be in compliance with the local ordinances. So if you're in compliance, is that the testimony? If it's
Correct.
not, and you're going to exceed it, then that has to be the testimony.
No, exceedance and compliance are 2 different elements, but we are testifying that even with 6, we will comply with the noise ordinance.
Thank you.
any other questions, for Ms. Fowler?
One of my comments had been to put a solid fence on the island that's on the west side of the parking spaces. I thought initially there was a residence right across the street, but then
I believe it's a commercial use.
it's a doctor's office, I believe. I think
Yes.
from the Google map, it looked like a residence. and
Yes.
it was Converted, so that would not be any longer a comment or a recommendation. And plus, there's a number of signs on that island area also. I don't think we could get a fence there.
Okay.
You had mentioned earlier that the vegetation isn't being considered because it really doesn't block sound for the most part. It blocks, it blocks.
It's more of a visual screen,
thing.
and that was the intent of the,
But you were taking the solid fence into consideration.
I was, yes, I am. I'm taking, I didn't measure the fence, but a solid PVC vinyl fence, it's gonna be about a pound and a half per square foot, and that's gonna reduce it by at least 5 dB. So again, I'm being conservative. I mean, perhaps the struggle here is because I was too conservative, and now I'm showing that there's this little element, but I really want to strengthen my testimony by saying that this element is not only within the tolerance of enforcement, we're talking 2 dB and 1 octave band, but that I don't think that it's actually going to occur. And I also further do not believe that from a logical standpoint, that the number of times that all 6 units are going to be fully in symphony are going to be minimized. I think that that's just the nature of how the facility will work. However, I'm looking at this in as sharp of a lens as I
So
can.
your measurements were taken from the applicant's side of the property.
No
and not-
measurements, it's all projections with
Your projections were taken from the applicant's side of the fence and not the neighbor's side of the fence.
the analysis then takes a 5 dB credit for the fence. And so I'm looking at it on the residential side.
So it's not, isn't the ordinance say at the property line?
So the wording of the ordinance is at or within the property line. And the guidelines that we talked about earlier discuss that from an enforcement standpoint, you look at where's the area of repose. So we have many lots across New Jersey that are flag lots where you might have a very remote area that's overly vegetative, it's not accessible. And so you wouldn't look at that as an area of enforcement, even though that might be the closest property line. Here we have a common property line. An enforcement measurement will be measured 3 feet inside that fence, somewhere where we want to acknowledge that they should have full use and benefit of their backyard. So where might they be for repose? That type of
So
analysis.
you took your measurements or your, not your measurements, but your
Analysis.
analysis based on the neighbor's side of the fence and at a point below 8 feet, not above 8 feet.
At ear height, yes.
I guess what started this whole conversation was that your report recommended 4. And I think that's what we addressed that. So it's a matter of record. So we're good.
Okay.
Any other questions from the engineer before I open it up for the public? Professionals? Counselor? This time, I need to take a motion to open up to the public. Everybody in favor? Okay. Anybody from the public like to speak? Please come up, state your name and address for the record.
Yeah, my name's Al Grabowski, Grabowski, live at 12 Berlin Place, Parlin, we're the neighbor. As Mark said, we have a good relationship as neighbors, it's fine. I had 2 concerns. My main concern was the hours of operation, which I understand now is 8 to 7, basically is the longest for the vacuums to work. If that's it, it's fine. Nobody's sleeping at that hour. Prior to this, when it was open at 11, 12, people would be playing music all night. It was crazy years ago. My second is added traffic to Berlin Place. Okay, when you guys approved the Jiffy or the lube, there was supposed to be no traffic added to Berlin Place. I can't blame the car wash for this. They have the one-way sign, they have the one-way exit. You're just supposed to come in, you can only exit onto Berlin. I would say 50% of the people come down Berlin and go right through the one-way the wrong way. I was there 2 weeks ago, working out front. I looked out, 8 cars in 12 minutes. I went and I yelled, look at the one way. I got 5 people that ignored me completely and went in, and I got 3 that gave me the middle finger.
So about one way going into the car wash?
Yeah, they keep going the one way from Berlin, they come down Berlin. Nobody wants to use Route 9. Same thing with the shopping center. I don't know, I've had an argument with the township about this for a long time. I've written so many letters about Berlin, it's out of control. So I'm just worried about more traffic added. How do you stop it? One-way strip, spike strip, that's what they need there. People don't care. They you know what? They come from everywhere else in town and they don't care. They throw their garbage, they fly down the street. It's not his fault, okay? He's a good neighbor, but it's just completely out of control. I've written 5 or 10 letters to the township, to the attorney, to the administrator, blah, blah. Berlin Place at one time was a dead-end road, okay? And somehow it got opened, and it was opened illegally. Nobody, I asked all your attorneys, just please give me a document, a signed, the approved site plan, a resolution approved, blah, blah, blah. Nothing. I can give you 9 problems that show it wasn't done legally. Why is it Berlin Place was a little road, is now a shopping center entranceway? Do you know there's like 2,000 cars go down that road a day, 3,000? It's insane. Now they opened up a gym, So now it's from 5 in the morning till 8 at night. When the bar opens, it's gonna be from 5 in the morning till 3 in the morning. Nobody, I've argued with the town, I've been very, very nice, but I've had it up to here. Just like I've had it up to pointing out a one-way and people tell you, go screw yourself. It's getting to the point, I've had it. I argued for this 5 years and been very nice. But let me ask you something. How come there's a sidewalk all the way up Bordentown for miles, comes down the other side of Burlew, but stops 12 feet short of the shopping center? There's dirt and a tree. You're gonna tell me that some engineer approved the opening of Burlew and didn't finish the sidewalk? I could give you, so many instances I gave to the township attorney, to this. They keep telling me, can you find out any more information? Why me? The guy that lived across the street is 94, Walter Ellis. He told me when he bought that, it was a dead end. He bought that lot just to build a house because it was a dead end. He said he built it, the shopping center got built, he came home from work, and all of a sudden it was busted through. How is Burlew only 29 feet wide and the main road inside the thing is 35 feet wide? I could go on and on engineering. Listen, I work for developers all my life.
Excuse me.
Something's not right.
I understand that you have concerns
know.
about the
I'm
road
done- I'm
itself,
done with that.
but let's keep it to the application itself. The board does no
Okay, how are we gonna
jurisdiction over
stop
the
more
other
traffic
issue.
from
So
coming
your
down?
concern is access from the side road onto the site itself.
Everybody abuses everything. It's just ridiculous.
As far as this application is concerned, I'm certain that the vacuum, addition of the vacuum cleaners is not going to generate that much more traffic, because I'm assuming people vacuum the cars and go into the car wash.
Well, the car wash was the lube was not supposed to increase traffic. And I could tell you, it just comes down and it's not their fault. They had a one-way sign in the driveway, but they just look and they right in the wrong way. Nobody monitors anything. It's out of control.
No, it's borough issue. I know you've been before the borough before, and I know they put that no left-hand turn sign going out of Burlew to try to alleviate.
Yeah,
that.
you know what? That works 50% of the time. You're gonna see all the people that go down that way. I can't go left. I gotta go the other way on Route 9. It's just, we live there and that road is out of control. It's not right. I've questioned the town, I've asked, and I cannot get a final answer from anybody or an approved site plan resolution. I would shut up today and never ask, never say anything. Give me that. They can't because there is none. So I just wanted to say that because I'm up to here and eventually I am going to want to put my foot through somebody's window because they don't care.
Well, that's.
I know it's not right, but you know what?
That's
I've been
not part
nice.
of this board. If you have, it's more appropriate for town council. The board here is hearing this application
Okay.
and your
All right,
concern.
I'm sorry.
No, it's
Okay.
okay. We
The
understand the
application, the
frustration.
neighbors are nice people. As far as if they're only gonna use the vacuums from 8 to 7, I have no problem with it. Just can they control more people coming in the one way because it gets a little crazy. We're right there and that's the one way right there and nobody abides by it. The people just don't care.
Thank you.
Okay? Thank you for listening to me rant. You know, I've had it up to here. You have no idea what goes on that road. All right, thank you.
Have a good night. Anybody else in the public like to speak? Seeing none, we're not on video or anything. On telephone, nobody's.
No, we're not.
So I take a motion to close the public?
Make motion, make motion to close public.
Everybody in agreement? Council, you want to sum up?
Mr. Chairman, board members, I won't belabor the court, I won't belabor you all with a re-rendition of all the testimony. You've heard from my client, my client's witnesses, the two engineers, and even the neighbor here. We just asked that the board take this application for what it is under consideration and grant my client's application in this regard.
Applicant, you want to address any of the neighbors' concerns? Guess he's doing that right now.
Yeah. No, do you want to address anything that?
No, just talking amongst.
Yeah, no, I mean, again, I think you heard the neighbor say that it's not my client's fault or encouragement or anything. It's just the way that everything is designed there. And, you know, he can, you know, he's doing his best to be a good neighbor, as you can see them talking now.
Mr. Chairman, there's maybe, and Jay, maybe there's opportunity to do a little better job with the pavement markings for the one-way exit. Looking at the plan, it just shows an arrow making a left-hand turn. When you get to that exit, maybe having one showing the arrow just pointing straight out, maybe the additional sign can be added just to enhance The signage is there and the pavement markings.
The problem is people on Burlou making a left turn into the site. That's the issue that I think the resident is referring to. So striping on the site is not going to address that. It's
Just a clearer one-way arrow closer to the intersection rather than just have an arrow pointing to the left or something to be done that maybe would deter a few other people from going in. If it seems like it's not reasonable, then don't worry about it. That's fine.
Yeah, I think if the concern is this applicant can't do something on Burlou to
No.
prevent the left turns in, which is what the issue is. That's an enforcement issue where somebody is turning in against a one-way. That's really what the problem is, which would end up being a police issue.
Okay, thank you.
Done, Counselor?
Thank you. Yes.
What the board like to do? Remember, the applicant is requesting 2 waivers, is it, Jay? There's 2 waivers?
I think there were 3, but they're all pre-existing. It was the sidewalk layout, the loading area, and the front yard parking.
Approve the application? Okay, I have a motion to approve the application. Need a second?
Second,
Need a roll call vote?
Mr. Allegra? Mr. Bailey?
yes.
Mr. Blamar? Mr. McEnon?
Yes.
Mr. Mueller? Councilman Onoha? Oh, he's not here, sorry. Ms. Patel?
Yes.
Ms. Pulowski? Mr. Sposato?
Okay, application has been approved.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, board members. Good to see you again. Y'all
Old
have a
business,
good
new
night.
business. Our next meeting is April 20th, Beth?
Yes.
What do we have on the agenda for that, Jay?
Mr. Chairman, you have one application for the Sarebrook Veterinary Clinic. They have a very small addition they're putting in the back of their property. So it's a minor site plan application.
Okay, that's it?
Yes, that's it.
Have anything else? I'll take a motion to adjourn. Second? All in favor? Let's go home. Thanks, Council.